1. Welcome to another edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum, and with us, as always now, is Keith Beebe of the Phinsider with a PH. We got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We have the NFL Combine to have instant reactions to. We have draft prospects to talk about, and the recent actions made by the Miami Dolphins regarding what could be the offseason plan going into 2016. Olivier Vernon has been given the infamous transition tag. The Miami Dolphins seem to be one of the only teams in the league who even bothers to use it. So we'll discuss what we feel about them using that and how we feel about the whole situation going forward with Olivier Vernon in general. But first, we're going to go ahead and start talking about the Combine. Keith, I know that you were keeping a very close eye on a lot of players. You have some of your eyes on some very interesting prospects that could be used in the first or maybe even the second or third rounds. So I'm going to start with you on this. Tell me what you thought about the Combine. Did you find anything significant that is worth noting?
I think probably the most important thing to note about this most recent Combine is that if you're in the market for defensive prospects, it was a great weekend. There was a lot of impressive showings. If you're starved for offense, it's not a great field. So the Dolphins definitely picked the right year to be in the hunt for guys on all three levels of defense. So, and I was pleased with a lot of stuff that I saw on Sunday with the defensive line and the linebackers, and then the corner stuff on Monday and the safeties pretty much reaffirmed a lot of things that I suspected going in. I don't think there was any real surprises. I think Darian Thompson of Boise State running slow was a little bit strange. I expected a little bit better time from him, but I mean, I saw what I needed to see from the guys on Monday, and I was really pleased with a lot of stuff that came through on Sunday. I know it was surprising to some people, like DeForest Buckner running slower than a lot of people expected. Joey Bosa didn't really have a great time. Noah Spence didn't run particularly well, and I've heard that his hamstring might have been. They kept using the term glitchy. I don't know what's up with him. I mean, he's an odd case anyway if you're looking at his overall stock. But I mean, I saw what I needed to see, and I mean, I think Dolphins fans should be excited. I mean, if you're looking to load up on defense in the draft,
By maybe not necessarily in the first round. I mean, I know that we still are. I don't. Are you still? Do you still have the DeForest Buckner?
this is definitely a year to do it.
So, was there anybody that you were particularly?
Well, that depends because there's the word out there that eventually
For the first round?
The Dolphins are going to transition this current group over to the 3-4 and using a wide 9 frequent 4-3 is kind of their way of easing in that transition. So, I mean, if that was the case, I like DeForest Buckner. I think that if he's playing in a 4-3, he's a defensive tackle. If he's playing in a 3-4, he's a 5-tech, and I like him as a 5-tech. I thought the guy that probably helped his stock the most, if we're talking about, day one, fringe day two guys, would be Darren Lee, the linebacker out of Ohio State. He ran incredibly well. And he really, I think, put himself in the discussion for, really, I hate to say it, but you've got that void now where, Jalen Smith gets hurt, and easily, I shouldn't say easily because Miles Jack is kind of an all-around guy, but I thought Jalen Smith was the best outside linebacker in this class, and now that you have that void there, he wasn't able to work out. You have a lot of guys who are versatile linebackers who can step up and really cover some ground in terms of draft stock. I thought Darren Lee was excellent. I thought Reggie Ragland was better than expected. He showed it at the combine significantly lighter than he was at the Senior Bowl. He ran a 4.72, which I was thrilled because I figured that he was probably going to be like a mid 4.8 guy, and he doesn't play particularly fast on tape. So I was thrilled to see that. And I mean, if I had to say like a guy, I don't really have Buckner fever. If I could take anyone at number 8 right now, unless somebody ridiculous fell, I'd probably still stick with Vernon Hargraves. And I liked his workout yesterday. I thought he looked excellent in his drills. I was surprised his lower body was. I mean, usually for cornerbacks, well, first of all, he showed up to the combine heavier than I thought they had him around like the 190, 195 range at Florida. He was 204 in Indianapolis this weekend, and came in at like 5'10 and a half, which is fine. I think there some people were worried he was going to be come in shorter than 5'10, but I mean he's built thickly in the legs, which you don't really see out of a lot of corners. I mean, he's built like a tank in the lower body, which I thought that was interesting, and I liked how he ran. I know there is, I mean, the official times, there's a bit of a disparity there, but I thought he looked good. Jalen Ramsey was incredible, as everyone suspected he would be. But I mean, I saw, and Eli Apple was a guy who I think really helped himself yesterday. I liked Eli Apple as a potential guy for the Dolphins. So he was one of those guys where you're like, I wanted to do well, but not too well. And Eli Apple, I thought, looked outstanding yesterday.
So that means essentially we're going to have trouble looking at him possibly in the second round. I mean, we still have a top 40 pick. We have two top 40 picks, and usually that's when the best talent is found. And then after that, you're basically just looking for acorns.
Well, there's a couple ways you can look at it, because suppose they take suppose they take Hargraves at number 8. There's a lot of guys who worked out in the defensive line group and in the linebacker group on Sunday, who, I mean, likely early day 2 picks you can look at. And probably the pass rusher who intrigues me the most right now, well, 2 of them, Emmanuel Ogba out of Oklahoma State. I was hoping he was going to stay a secret. He looked pretty good in Indianapolis. I think that he kind of opened people's eyes and showed them that, I mean, he's someone who deserves to be in the first round conversation. I'm not sure if he'll get there, but I think he's good enough to be there. And Leonard Floyd. And the only problem I had with Leonard Floyd is they compared him to Deion Jordan during the telecast, and I was like, oh, you don't want to see that. But Leonard Floyd put on weight. I think he was about 244 at the combine. I'd like to see him around 250 if he's gonna be a pass rusher in the NFL. But yeah, I think he was like 230 some at Georgia, which is just absurd considering the fact he's like just under 6'6". So there's a lot of really good pass rushers I think will be available early on day 2 if that's the direction they want to go. I think that there will be some good linebackers available on day 2. So I mean, but the problem is that a lot of the guys who were early day 2 corners, Eli Apple was considered one of them. He was like a fringe guy. I think he's probably a first rounder now. William Jackson III out of Houston was considered a fringe guy. I think he's probably he really helped himself this weekend. He was outstanding yesterday. So I think he helped. So if not the worst thing to go corner first and then look through the deeper classes, which would be defensive line and to a lesser extent linebacker. But I mean, there are a lot of good corners out there, but a lot of those guys helped themselves yesterday. So I mean, that's a stickier situation.
Okay, we have our guest calling in now. Brandon Howard of Sports Talk Florida. I asked him to come on with us. He was in Indianapolis. That's a tongue twister right there. In Indianapolis, and he was able to see all these prospects firsthand, see them work, see and talk to them. So thanks, Brandon, for coming on with us. We really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely.
So tell me about your initial reactions to the combine. Just tell us, as people who don't actually get to go there all the time, just tell us a little bit about how it was to be up there and to see all these prospects in action.
It's great. You get a lot of you get a lot of face time with all the guys, and it's good to kind of just talk to them and talk shop with them, get to know what they played in their NFL offenses or defenses, and get a feel for what it is that they know about the game. So in their experiences, so those are the things that are kind of invaluable to the combine. And then of course, when it comes to medicals and things of that nature, you do get firsthand information. So those things are always good to have as well.
Was there anybody anybody in particular who impressed you? Somebody that you talked to and you were just like, wow, this guy really knows what he's got?
I would say, and the guy I really was looking forward to talking to as well, and that's Sean Davis, the safety out of Maryland. He played some corner as well. Guy really, really gets it. understands, just the secondary as a whole, and how everything, works together. And he feels like he can play a little bit of a center field as a free safety, and also feels like he can come down, drop down, and play in the nickel as well. And that's a guy that's not hesitant also to come in the alley and fill, as a run defender. So he talked about how he played baseball as well, so that helps him with his ball skills as far as center fielding, as a free safety. So that's a guy, and he also went and ran 4.46 in the 40, so that definitely helped his stock. And if you turn on the tape on the guy, he's a very alert and keenly aware ball player. That's a guy you want on your team in the secondary.
And that's definitely going to be something that Miami's going to have to look at very closely, considering the possibilities about Brent Grimes maybe leaving, or the uncertainty in the secondary as a whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, Brandon. So is there anybody that you're looking at, like in particular for the Dolphins at 8, that might be able to fill that void? I mean, do you have in mind Hargreaves? Do you have in mind Alexander, or do you perhaps trying to pull off this miracle fall of Jalen Ramsey, which I don't think will happen, but I digress.
Right. Jalen Ramsey is definitely not going to happen. He is a rare athlete, and he's a guy that, if his mind says get to that spot over there, he's going to be there in enough time to make a play, So Jalen Ramsey is a guy that's not going to be there. But if and Miles Jack, he may or may not be there, depending upon what the teams before the number 8 pick do. But Miles Jack is a guy that he can play so many different roles on a defense. And I always talk about making a defense multiple, and that means that regardless of what personnel that the offense rolls out there, you're able to match up. You're flexible. And Miles Jack, he can play some safety. He can play middle linebacker. He can play a little bit of edge rusher. He can do a little bit of everything. So, that's a guy, I feel like the Dolphins, if he's on the board, they must take. You brought up the uncertainty of Brent Grimes and what might happen with him. We don't know yet. There's a lot that's going to take place in the next few days here. But, if they elect to part ways with him, you have to take a look at Hargreaves. I think that his ball skills, working, also with his footwork, I think that he has some of the best feet out there on the field. Forget what you saw in the combine drills and things of that nature. His ability to stay in the hip pocket of the wide receiver, that's something that definitely is rare. And people are going to talk about his size and, he's only 5'10", he's, 200 pounds or so. He only runs a 4.5. When you turn on the tape, this guy is right by the receiver, always in a position to make a play, and that's what you want.
Now, you brought up Miles Jack, and I've been pretty much on this Miles Jack bandwagon for the longest time. I equate him to essentially being the linebacker version of Rashad Jones. It's like wherever you need him to be, he's there, and it's not even a question whether he'll be there or not.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I had the pleasure of asking him a little bit about, him playing some running back. And I told him, the way I phrased my question was that the running back and the middle linebacker position mirror one another. They mirror one another, just like the wide receiver and the cornerback position mirror one another. So that will enable him to play and be instinctive at the middle linebacker position. I know there was a lot of talk about, he's a weak side linebacker. He's a run and chase defender. That's it. That's all he is. No, he's a guy that can look into the backfield, diagnose from the inside out, and know what's coming before it happens because he played the running back position. So he knows what a running back is thinking on any given play. So the only thing that would have to change, and he played a little bit of middle linebacker at UCLA. That's what people don't understand. If you study the tape, he lined up at middle linebacker, on occasion this past year before the injury. So, there's no doubt about it, and he actually confirmed that a lot of teams are looking at him at middle linebacker.
Yeah, and if they do manage to get Miles Jack, I think the Dolphins would they would essentially bolster their linebacker core to the point where I don't know if it's safe to say that they would be good, because I don't know how good Miles Jack has to be for the linebackers to be good. I mean, I like Jelani Jenkins a lot. I still think he can be good. If Miles Jack is in the middle, that helps a lot. Koamisi at the side, I guess.
Yeah.
My
Oladipo
biggest.
has a strong side. That's something. He's serviceable. Do you want to maybe replace him? In the near future, that's something to take a look at. But I think that Kolamisi, if you got a guy like that heading downhill, you don't expose him to having to cover guys. I think that the Dolphins would be okay, and I think that Jelani Jenkins would be just fine as a weak side linebacker as well. So if you add in also a one technique or a guy that can kind of free up Sue to do his thing and be that penetrating three technique that he's capable of being, I think that you've significantly helped your defense. And it's a matter of freeing up Sue. And I think that there's a couple guys in the draft that can make that happen.
Do you have anybody in particular for that job?
Yes, I got a chance to talk to DJ Reader, the defensive tackle out of Clemson. He's a guy that also he played some baseball. He actually was a pitcher at one point, which is at 340 pounds. Could you imagine that? He can.
We have Bartolo Colon, man. We don't need to imagine.
Yeah. Tell me about it. So, he could actually throw upwards of 94 miles an hour. He was talking about that. And but he's a guy that can he can take up two blockers, he can tie up two. He takes pride in that, and that's why you saw the Clemson defensive ends have the success that they had. And he's also a guy that can he can play throughout the game. He can get a lot of snaps, give you some quality snaps throughout the game. He's not a guy that you have to constantly sub in and out of the game because he is very well conditioned. Even considering as big as he is. So that's a guy that could definitely do the job. And if you want to maybe pass on linebacker early, you can take a look at a guy like Andrew Billings out of Baylor. He's got an incredible first step. And what's good about him is that he can either tie up two blockers, or if guys want to double team a guy like Sue, he can penetrate as well because he has a very nice first step. If you look at him, you say, oh, man, he's got a sloppy build. He doesn't look, physically imposing, but he's actually got a tremendous first step, and he can take up two blockers if necessary. So he's very versatile. And you also need to look at a guy named Kenny Clark out of UCLA, defensive tackle. He can play a myriad of positions. He can play zero. He can play the one. He can also play a three technique. So that's another guy to keep an eye on.
Now, go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Chad.
This is a little bit shift of gears, but I think the drafting for the Dolphins is going to be dramatically impacted by what happens with the quarterbacks, and I have seen this all over the board when you look at what the analysts or people that follow really close think. I've seen Wentz being the first. I've seen Goff being the first. I've even seen Paxton Lynch being in the top 10. And, being around the combine, did you see quite a bit of excitement surrounding the quarterbacks, or do you think two of them will jump in the picks prior to the Dolphins in there?
Yeah, this is okay. My personal opinion of the quarterbacks, and I'm just going to throw this out there. This is my personal take on the quarterbacks. Neither Goff or Wentz should be considered top 10 quarterbacks in this draft. They shouldn't be considered with the top 10 picks. I feel like if these guys are selected in the top 10 picks, these GMs and the coaching staff there, the front office execs, they'll be looking for new jobs in 3 years. So I don't think either one of them are ready. And my personal opinion is, if you look at Cardale Jones, and I have my reasons for it, he's the top quarterback in this draft. And the reason I say that is because he's a guy that can stare down the barrel of the gun, make the plays down the field. And he's never lost a game at Ohio State. People forget that. I'm still trying to find the tape of Cardale Jones losing a game at the quarterback position for Ohio State. Yes, he was, taking JT Barrett took over for him. I understand that. But they had the offensive coordinator move to go over to Houston, and that offense was tailored to Cardale Jones when they went on their national championship run. So when the offensive coordinator left, the offense was then structured around a guy named for JT Barrett, and that's why he thrived in that offense. That wasn't offense that was, I guess, tailor-made for Cardale Jones, and that's why he didn't have the year that many anticipated. But I digress. So getting back to your question, there was some buzz about the quarterbacks, particularly by the media. But as I began to speak to some of the scouts that I had the pleasure of dealing with while I was there in Indianapolis, they feel the same way that I feel. And these are teams that are scouts from teams that are in the top 10. And they don't feel like either of these quarterbacks are ready. So, it depends on what it comes down to is, okay, do you feel like these guys could potentially become, number one signal callers in the NFL, and quality starters in the NFL? And that's what it's dependent upon. But I don't think that I think that these quarterbacks will actually be taken a little lower than a lot of people think.
So you don't think that Carson Wentz and Jared Goff and these guys are going to wind up going in the top 10, which means that the Dolphins are going to have even slimmer pickings than usual. Because if Miami was going to pick somebody who's going to be valuable to them, like in the top 8, then that would some of the quarterbacks would have to jump up. If you had to take a guess, Brandon, what teams do you think might take a quarterback like Carson Wentz or Jared Goff? Like, okay, besides the Browns, I have to make that disqualification. Besides the Browns.
Besides the Browns, you know what? That's a tough one. I know the Browns are looking at Wentz. I do know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. But it's going to depend upon what happens here in free agency as well, and or if any team is going to do anything to get Colin Kaepernick on their roster. As far as the second team, I mean, the only thing that I can think of is, and this is, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, outside of the top 10, and that's going to be you've got the Eagles and the Rams. So those are a couple teams that are going to be looking at quarterbacks.
Even though the Eagles just signed Sam Bradford to a 2-year deal?
Yeah, absolutely. It's still a 2-year deal, but they're going to be looking for their signal caller of the future. And from what I understand, Paxton Lynch is the guy that they have their eye on.
Interesting. Yeah, I was just curious what you guys are hearing for buzz, because that makes a huge impact on the Dolphins. Just from watching the combine, not being there, I thought, that there's clearly, the elite players are, Laremy Tunsil is an obvious top 5 pick.
Absolutely.
You can pretty much plug him in. I would absolutely love Miami to get their hands on Jalen Ramsey. He looks special to me. Everybody I've heard talk about him tells me he's just complete stud, and wherever he plays, corner or safety. So I'll be stunned if he gets past the top 5. And then I do agree with you that Miles Jack. So any of those 3 players going to Miami, I'd be just ecstatic. But Jack probably is the only one that even has a chance. But the one player that I'm interested in, and I think that could be affected by the quarterbacks, I thought was Joey Bosa, because he wasn't that impressive at the combine. The thing that really stood out to me is he didn't show a really good bench press, and he clearly wasn't like this crazy speed. Obviously, on the field, he's been dominant. But it makes me wonder, was his combine unimpressive enough that he might fall a little bit into that? He's still going to be a top 10 pick more than likely, but he may be in that number 8 range for the Dolphins. And I highly doubt that, something crazy happens. I just don't see Miami keeping Olivier Vernon. And so they're going to have a strong need at D end. And so I just wondered what your thoughts were. Do you see a scenario where you think Bosa will fall down to 8 to Miami, or do you think that's probably pretty unlikely?
I think that's pretty unlikely. And if you look at a guy like Bosa, he was very, how can I say this? He was very polished coming out of high school. Wasn't the greatest athlete in the world. Never has been, never will be. But he's very polished. You look at the program he came out of, St. Thomas Aquinas, and then he goes to Ohio State. He's mentored by some of the best defensive coaches there are in the land. So he's a guy that he knows how to get after the quarterback. His hands are exceptional. He knows what to do with his hands to be able to shed blocks and get around blocks and things of that nature. But he's never going to be the fastest guy around the edge. That's just not his game. So if you can get past that, understand that he's a guy that's just going to find a way to get to the quarterback. It's not supreme athleticism. It's not exceptional strength or anything of that magnitude. It's just that he is he's almost like a magician with his hands in order to get to the quarterback. So just understand that he's very polished, and that translates, and he's going to be able to find a way to get to the quarterback. So he'll be a top 5 pick. If he's not, I think that's a mistake. You can't pass on a guy like Bosa. His production is unreal, and he just knows how to get to the quarterback.
No,
he's great against the run too. I think that's
what you
always
said?
I said he's great against the run too. I think if there's any failing with Bosa in this whole combine process, is that people expected him to be this freak rusher, but as you mentioned, he came out of St. Thomas Aquinas College and playing at Ohio State. He was always a combo player. I mean, he was a very good pass rusher, but he was outstanding against the run too.
Exactly.
And played against some of the best tackles in the country doing it. So I mean, but I didn't expect him to have a freak time. I didn't think he was going to go out there and run like a 4.5. I didn't expect him to put out monstrous reps. But I mean, I agree with you that I think that he's a good player where if you're just going to look at his workout, a lot of his value gets lost in translation. And that probably won't be lost on the top 5 teams, but I'm intrigued to see because I think Jacksonville's a team that will be interested in him, depending on how they feel with Dante Fowler and whatnot. But I'm with you that I think a lot of his value is lost in translation. But I mean, if you watch his tape, I mean, there's a lot of things there that he does at a high level. And I would say has a lot of professional savvy in his approach to the game.
Absolutely.
Okay, Brandon, a couple more things, and then we're gonna go ahead and let you go. I wanted to bring this up because we had a slight disagreement on Twitter the other day regarding the fate of one Jalen Smith, and I don't know, man. I feel like would you if he had never gotten injured, he would have probably been one of the top linebackers in this draft, and if his injury is anything like what Marcus Lattimore is going to deal with, I don't know if he will ever recover, and I feel like that if I would be willing to take a late round flyer on somebody like a Jalen Smith, who, if there's always that possibility of if he does recover, then essentially you have used a 5th or 6th or whatever round draft pick on a guy who is a first round talent. There's always that chance, and since Miami is needing playmakers and late round picks they rarely pan out to become superstars, I would think that if you were going to take a shot on somebody, it would be somebody like Jalen Smith, who we at least know he would be a redshirt guy, but when he does show up, maybe in 2017, that he would be this stud kind of a player.
Right, and I guess my confusion was with the value that you're, associating with selecting him. So what round might you select him in? I guess was the confusion.
Yeah.
So I of course if you can get him in the 5th or 6th round or something like that, by all means, But there's always going to be that one team that falls in love and they bank on him recovering. And they say, you know what, I'm going to use a 3rd rounder on this guy or a 2nd rounder on this guy. Just how high do you take him? Do you bank on that? And you say, you know what, this medical says that he's going to be okay in time. We don't even have a timetable for his return at this point because we don't know when the nerve is going to regenerate. So, it's the perineal nerve, and that's the nerve. I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. But it's the perineal nerve, and that's the nerve that controls the foot going up and down. So it's a similar injury to, I don't know if you remember the basketball player Jason Williams that came from Duke, had the motorcycle accident. That's a similar injury that he had when he had the motorcycle accident. So, that's just something to keep an eye on. We just don't know when the nerve will regenerate. But if you can get them 5th or 6th round, by all means, go ahead and make it happen.
Yeah, my thought was never about right now. It was more along the lines of this guy could be a stud in the future. And considering what Miami's situation is, I don't see why you don't take that gamble on somebody as talented as Smith is.
Absolutely. I mean, he's an absolute animal on the field, and my heart goes out to the kid. I hope he's able to recover and bounce back from this and realize his potential. I hate to see that happen to anyone, but hopefully he gets back there. I mean, and could you imagine if the Dolphins are fortunate enough to take Miles Jack early, at pick number 8, and some way somehow they're able to land Jalen Smith later on and he recovers? I mean, could you imagine that? So
that would be quite a core.
Yeah, tell me about it. So it doesn't get much better than that. But it's just we don't know. It's a lot of variables out there, and it just it's unfortunate it happened to him.
All right. One more thing, Brandon, and this is not going to be draft related. The Dolphins put the transition tag on Olivier Vernon. Now, I know that
Yes.
you've been on Twitter and you've essentially been saying that Olivier Vernon is pretty much the best thing that we can find right now. So, but
Hmm.
people are unwilling to pay him 12 or 15 million dollars, and I honestly don't really want to give Vernon that much either. I know he's
Sure.
good, but he's 15 million gives him somewhere along the lines of something that JJ Watt is making, and I know even you don't think that Olivier Vernon is in JJ Watt's range.
Oh, absolutely not. But it's just kind of the sign of the times that we're in right now. And it's a pressure league. It's a guy that led the league in pressures, and it's going to be hard to some way somehow, I guess. How are you going to fill that void? Once he's gone. You got guys in the draft, Lawson from Clemson, Dodd, and those guys. Those are the guys that are going to be in the Dolphins' range. But are they going to even come remotely close to producing at the level that Olivier Vernon was able to, especially towards the end of the season? It's like a light bulb, like something just went off for Olivier Vernon. Something clicked. And you talk about a guy that's exceptionally versatile. He's lining up in a 2-point stance. He's lining up as inside shade. As a three technique and causing pressures from there. So I don't think any of those guys right now in the draft that you're talking about that are in the Dolphins range are able to do the things that Olivier Vernon was able to do. So it's going to be Dolphins are in a very they're in a precarious position right now as far as creating pressures and getting a defensive end that can do the things that Olivier Vernon did. But is he worth that much money? He's not. You don't want to pay him that much, but at least this transition tag keeps the Dolphins from, I guess, essentially bidding against themselves.
But people were hoping to get that compensatory pick if he just walked. So, do you agree with that assessment, with that line of thinking?
But the compensatory pick, just how much value is really associated with that? How much are you going to, like, what round is that going to be? It's going to be later on in the draft. So,
yeah, it'd more than likely be a late round, like maybe a sixth or seventh, I'm guessing.
Exactly. So, there's so many unknowns with that. It's just, a bird in the hand is worth what? Two in the bush. It's going to be rough for the Dolphins. I don't know exactly what they're going to do at the defensive end position, but hopefully they're able to find a way to bring him back. I know that they were very, very high on bringing him back. I spoke to Tannenbaum during the combine, and he essentially said that it's also a lot. A lot of it depends upon what happens with Wake. So we have to wait and see what happens with him as well.
Well, so far it doesn't look all that good.
It doesn't.
Oh, well, we all hope that he would retire a Dolphin, but if that's not what happens, then I guess there's really nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, right now he just doesn't feel the need to really, I guess, renegotiate. And, and he really has no leverage at this point if you look at his contract as far as Wake is concerned. He has no leverage. So the Dolphins can say, take this or be gone. And if he says, you know what, I'm not taking that, then, he's essentially out of there.
The business world of the NFL. Well, what can you do? Brandon, thanks for joining us, man. We really appreciate you talking and giving us your insight. And we'd love to have you on again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, man.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. So that was Brandon Howard of Sports Talk Florida. You can follow him on Twitter at let me just get his handle here because it's not actually Sports Talk Brandon. It's okay. It's sports minus the O. SPRTSTLK Brandon. So it's Sports Talk Florida just with no vowels. Okay. So that was him, and he was at the combine. He got to see all this awesome stuff, and he talked to these prospects. Got to see it firsthand. And Keith, you didn't really do much talking. It was pretty much an interview type thing. But I want to hear what you thought about what he had to say about the combine and all the prospects that he brought up.
No, I totally agree, and I'm right with him on the quarterback perspective too. And I was a little bit confused by some of the analysts who came out of Saturday's workouts, just talking about how good the quarterbacks looked. I didn't think they looked that good. We know that quarterback value always gets pushed up anyway. So even though I agree with him that Wentz, Goff, not top 10 picks or top 10 caliber picks, but they will be. I mean, Wentz will one of those guys is going to go number 2 to Cleveland. Cleveland, in a lot of ways, really doesn't have a choice. You got this new regime. You have to figure it's not going to work out with Johnny Manziel. Their other quarterbacks can't stay healthy. So, I mean, what do you do? I mean, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place there.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I think their only real, I mean, the only other option if they didn't draft there would have been, which Washington cut him off, would have been maybe to pay a huge contract to Kirk Cousins and bring him in. They could still, maybe chase Brock Osweiler and hope that he could be their quarterback of the future. But I don't know on that. Cleveland, I don't know how they can't take a quarterback, to be honest. I mean, if they didn't, I mean, that's like, because whether that, this is the issue you always run into, is whether or not they are the guys, the quarterbacks, and obviously there isn't the can't miss candidate, but I mean, the can't miss candidate is so rare. I mean, I would have said Peyton Manning probably would have been that, and I would have said Andrew Luck would have been that. Other than that, you just have the top rated quarterbacks, and I don't know if this year's really any different, but if you don't, attempt to get them when you're there, if you finish the season 8-8 or 6-10 or 7-9, a lot of times in those drafts, you're not going to get a shot to get those quarterbacks again. They're the top, couple ranked quarterbacks. So you almost got to take those shots when you get them if you're in that scenario. I mean, they don't really even have a legitimate, veteran quarterback to even start there right now. So I can't imagine them not doing that, not taking a quarterback. But I'm just seeing everything in the mocks. That's why I had to ask the question, because it just so dramatically affects for the Dolphins. And I'm on board with taking Miles Jack. If somehow Joey Bosa fell or Ramsey unbelievably fell, I just can't see it happening, I would take it there. But to me, after this combine, Miami's, if they get somebody that wants one of those quarterbacks, like a team like, say, the Rams or the Eagles or somebody in that range, usually you don't want to mess with the division, but, maybe even the Jets will want to make a move for one of those quarterbacks if they really like one. But, with like players like Apple and Lee in there right now and Ragland, those are players that you could probably obtain in the late teens to the 20s. And if Miami can pick up an extra second or third round pick, they desperately need that. They have several holes to fill right now. And if you're not getting a player that you're pretty confident is a Pro Bowl level player right there at 8, their best move right now is to trade back, because I was not that impressed with Vernon Hargrave's combine. I mean, the absolute number one factor you need as a cornerback is speed, and especially recovery speed. More than ever when you're young. I mean, if you don't have speed and teams know that, you're immediately at a disadvantage. I know there's a lot more to it. How are your feet? How are your hips? How's your technical understanding of the position in the game?
Yeah, I was about to go off on that because you said speed. It's like, because I remember.
But it's something. To me, it's like when you talk about a quarterback.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Does a quarterback having a really good arm mean he's going to be a good quarterback? Not at all. But it's hard to make him a good quarterback if he doesn't have that arm. And that's my concern with Hargraves, is what he clearly showed to me is he does not have elite speed. And that's fine. I have no doubt he'll still be a solid corner. But do you take him at number 8 then? I mean, or do you just wait and take Apple in the teens? Or do you take Mackenzie Alexander? And so to me, I don't. Vernon Hargreaves doesn't stand out to me as a guy that you need to take at 8. To me, if you drop back and can pick up picks, I don't know that you're making a mistake to take somebody like Mackenzie Alexander a little bit later, or even Eli Apple. If these guys like that, I don't know. To me, I'm only seeing these 3 or 4 players that I feel like are the blue chip sure things. And after that, I don't know that it's great for Miami to hang around at 8. I don't know what your guys' opinion are, but that's what I'm seeing right now.
I think that the guy they're if you're talking about trading back, and I agree with you, I think trading back would be an excellent path for the Dolphins. I think DeForest Buckner is probably the guy who, if he gets through, can probably get them down in the draft a little bit. I know Chicago for a fact, living up here. I know DeForest Buckner is the guy. That's not even really speculation. I know that if Chicago can get anyone in this draft, I think it's DeForest Buckner. Can get anyone reasonably. A couple of scenarios before we discuss that. If you want a guy like Joey Bosa to fall, you need Ronnie the pivotal pick for something like that to happen is number 3, which is San Diego. You need San Diego to take Ronnie Stanley. You need them to take someone. Ideally Ronnie Stanley. You need him to move up because I think that's when you'd see like a Jalen Ramsey go 5th to Jacksonville, and we don't know what Baltimore and San Francisco are going to do. So that's what could start that. If you want Miles Jack, I think you need Dallas to take a quarterback. I think you need them to take someone not named Miles Jack and Ford because my suspicion is that it's going to be really hard to unseat Miles Jack as the guy in Dallas unless they're just playing an incredible poker face game right now, which they could be. But Miles Jack just strikes me as a Jerry World guy. I think if Buckner gets go ahead.
No, I say I agree with you, but with Gregory getting suspended, I think Bose is in play too with Dallas right now because obviously with their defensive end situation, they have
with Greg Hardy too.
Well, yeah, but look at Greg Hardy.
I know that's what I'm saying. But you brought up Randy Gregory getting suspended, and then Greg Hardy's he's already out of there. So their defensive end situation is. Ugh.
Well, that's my point, and so that's why I'm thinking. Well, I agree. Miles Jack's going to be appealing there. He'll be appealing to more than just the Cowboys. I'm guessing, but those quarterbacks, it doesn't necessarily. That's if the order stays. But the real question to me is these teams that need a quarterback. So if you're a team like the Rams right now, I have to think the Rams want a quarterback pretty badly. They're moving to Los Angeles, so things are going on in for the Rams that are more than just about this season. They're trying to build their market, and especially if you're in a situation where are the Chargers going to go to Los Angeles at some point? Are the Raiders going to go to Los Angeles at some point? If that's the case, the Rams are in a situation right now where they need to get their market share now, and so they need to have players that are popular that put people in the stands, and it's hard to get more of a popular position than your quarterback position. And I wouldn't be shocked if they make a hard run at Peyton Manning to try to get him to come to play for the Rams just for his name, but I can't imagine they're planning on going into the season right now without obtaining a big quarterback. And so that's the team I kind of have my eye on. And you just never know what the heck the 49ers are going to do, whether they'll keep Kaepernick or they'll make a run at a quarterback. It's just so hard to say with them. But I have a feeling if those teams see those quarterbacks still available, if Goff, for example, is still available, and one of those teams have him as their clear-cut number 1 quarterback, I think Miami has a real good chance that they'll get a call at number 8. And so I'm hoping that either those if the 2 quarterbacks that go before Miami picks, if 2 of them go, then I think Miami has a real chance to get a real good player. They'll have a shot at Jack or Boza or Ramsey or one of those guys more than likely fall down to Miami. And if they don't, that means the quarterbacks are going to be available. And so there's a chance that one of those teams are going to decide we want to just move up and get our guy right now. So that's my hope right now.
The reason I mentioned, I also agree that Bosa in play at number 4 to Dallas. I think my mindset going into this draft is there's a lot of good pass rushers early on day 2, likely. And I think you got to take, if you're talking about blue chip players in this draft, Miles Jack comes pretty close, I think, in terms of overall ability, versatility, the fact that, the guy is a freak athlete. We haven't even seen his ceiling at this point. So I just see Dallas going in that direction. And then day 2, if they're fortunate to get like an Emmanuel Ogba, there's a couple of avenues. If they're fortunate for Shaq Lawson to fall, Shaq Lawson I thought had a good combine too. It's interesting to see hear that you weren't as big a fan of Hargrave's combine. I think it's if you needed him to prove something, you weren't impressed. If you were already good with him as a prospect, which I'm in that boat, you were fine with it. That's typically how it works with the combine anyway. I mean, if you see what you need to see, you're fine. If you need to see something and uh, you need to be convinced of it, then I mean that's a completely different story. And I get that too. But one thing I'll mention that when I was watching Vernon Hargraves play, and I've noticed it on his tape too, is he's got great burst. He's a real sudden guy. And if Vance Joseph is going to use a lot of zone coverage, which it sounds like this team is going to make a hefty use of that, I think Vernon Hargraves is an excellent guy in there. I think he's probably one of the most versatile corners in this draft. You keep hearing he's the best cover corner. I mean, that's something you can dispute. Brandon, who was just on, mentioned that the feet are really good, and they are. I like him overall. I agree that the long speed wasn't great, but everyone's going to point to Marcus Peters now, who I think ran like a 4.53 or something. So I mean, he'll run faster at his pro day anyway, and he's kind of in the same. I think Joe Hayden ran like almost a 4.6. And then went to his pro day and ran significantly faster. So he'll run faster there. And then, I mean, if it's something where you're not already impressed with him, I don't think he's going to change your mind. But if you like him as a prospect, then you're good. I do agree, though, that at number 8, you might be able to get away with trading down and still getting him because behind us, it's a wealth of teams that need. I mentioned Buckner. I think Chicago is a player there. You're going to have teams that are looking for pass rushers, potentially interior linemen too, guys like Sheldon Rankins. You could see him go to the Giants. The Saints are in there.
Yeah, and I think those D tackles are solid. I mean, this is a good draft if you need a D tackle, which Miami really doesn't. I mean,
for sure,
it never hurts to get a good one, but I think you'll see them D tackles come pouring off the board after that path through Miami. There, I think you're right on that.
So you could trade down there. I mean, like if you want to risk it, it's kind of like in 2012 when there was a significant lack of quarterback need after our pick at number 8, and a lot of people were like, if you could trade down in front of Seattle, you could still get Tannehill. So if you want to play one of those games, you can. If you could trade down in this draft, though, if you could add an extra 2, this is an incredible year to do it. Because then you can, like I said, I would probably go for the higher end corner first because I think that class is a little more shallow. So if you're able to get an Eli Apple, I'm not a big fan of Mackenzie Alexander in terms of him playing in a Vance Joseph scheme. Yeah, I think you can make it work anyway. I think he's got significant gifts as a cornerback prospect. He was kind of the wild card of the weekend just because you didn't see him work out anyway. But in Eli Apple, like Jackson, whatever, and then on day 2, or Ragland, I was a big fan of him too. Even a guy like Darren Lee is really someone you can consider too. And then on day 2, you're talking about your Leonard Floyds or Emmanuel Ogba if you're fortunate to get a Shaq Lawson down there. Charles Tapper was a guy who turned a lot of heads on Sunday during his workout. I mean, it's really strange how this draft is tiered in terms of you have a lot of guys who are really good situational pass rushers, and they're like fringe day 1, day 2 guys. All the corners are up there, but everything Chad said except for our fundamental disagreement on how we feel about Vernon Hargraves, I'm right there. I mean, if you can trade down, by all means, go for it. And I think that if a couple of these guys fall, if you get a Buckner, even some of the quarterbacks, if you can get some buzz going on there, or a defensive lineman, an offensive lineman, if Ronnie Stanley falls, I think people would be interested. So, I mean, there's plenty of scenarios here that could work in the Dolphins' favor.
Oh, yeah, and I'm not against Hargraves. I don't have any issue with Miami getting him. I just don't know that he doesn't stand out to me as a shutdown. This guy's going to be a stud corner. Not the way I feel about Ramsey anyway. I mean, to me, he just seems like if somehow the Dolphins got their hands on him, you could either start him at safety or put him out on the boundary in the corner. And he just appears to be such a good athlete and so fluid, and he's got everything. But like I said, that's just a pipe dream that he'll even be on the board. But it gets tough if you can fall back, because in Miami's situation, I know they're huge question marks, but you still don't really know what you have in Tony Lippett and Bobby McCain. And then, you have Brett Grimes getting older. And in my mind, I don't know, these corners, no matter how good they are, there's just that adjustment period in the NFL. It's hard to bring a rookie corner in, immediately insert him in the starting lineup and expect him not to get picked on by, people like Tom Brady. And so I feel like Miami, they desperately need the help at the linebackers and in the middle. And so, I don't know if they don't get, in that first couple rounds, if they don't get that linebacker, I don't see in free agency where you're going to get them. Maybe Laurinaitis can do it, but I just don't see the answer anywhere, to fix their linebacker issue. If they got Miles Jack, I'd be ecstatic. But if they don't, I think you're right. They got to get somebody like Darren Lee or Ragland or somebody they can put in there, because I think it's easier to bring a rookie in and insert him in at a linebacker and get a pretty high level of play out of him relative to a defensive back. Where if Miami wants to compete this year, that's the real question. And if they're wanting to compete this year, I don't know why they would. If they weren't planning on, trying to be a playoff contender, I don't know why they would have taken Olivier Vernon. But I think that you may be better off just to go get your best available veteran corner. So you have two veterans with Grimes and whoever you bring in, and then you still have your young guys in McCain and Lippett developing behind them. So that's why I'm a little tentative on Hargreaves, because he didn't stand out to me as like that blue chip prospect. I absolutely think if you get him, he'll come in here. He'll probably be a solid contributor to the team. I don't think he's an obvious bust or anything like that. I just didn't know that, you might be able to get a comparable player in value if you go by, points on a chart, maybe around between 15 and 20 as you would at 8 with him.
If you're looking at the corners in this draft, and I'm a big fan of just trying to compare previous personnel with a lot of the coaches we have now. And if you look at what Cincinnati had in their secondary when Vance Joseph was there, and then you look at this draft class and you try to figure which guy best fits that mold, I'd say it's probably Eli Apple. I think that he best embodies, except he's a little bit faster than some of those guys at Cincinnati. Vernon Hargreaves, though, kind of in a way reminds me of Leon Hall when he came out of Michigan in 2007. So there is that. That's just that's just me looking at it. But if I look at one guy and I'm like, yeah, that's a Vance Joseph corner, I'd say it's probably Eli Apple. But anything can change there. And the only linebacker I've seen mentioned in free agency, I've seen Vincent Ray's name a lot. Speaking of Cincinnati and whatnot. But if you're looking to change the overall tone of your defense, a guy like Reggie Ragland would do it. A leader at the second level of defense, a total thumper. You have everyone talking about how he benefited from having a great defensive line out or playing at Alabama. He's going to have similar inside talent in front of him in the pros if he goes to somewhere like Miami. So I'm not as down on him as some people, and I love the 4.72. That brightened things up for me a little bit, because I feared that he'd have a more plodding time, a 4.8, maybe even a 4.9.
No, I agree with you 100%, and that was why I entertained that idea of the trade back, because I think you can get Ragland. You have a real good possibility of getting him all the way back to like 20. I just don't teams. He's probably a 2-down linebacker. He's a first, second down linebacker. But with Miami, you have Jelani Jenkins, and the way Hewitt looked at the end of the year, I don't feel too bad. Pulling Ragland out for an extra D back, or just putting Hewitt in there in the more of a passing down situations, and just matching up personnel. But Miami has got to fix their run defense, and they've paid all this money into Sue, and it's just ridiculous to think of them having a stud like Sue up there, but having just no linebacker talent behind him. And if you did bring a guy in like Ragland, good luck running the ball, near the middle of the field on the Dolphins with Sue with Ragland behind him. So I'd be all about that, but I just can't justify picking Ragland at 8 overall, because he may
no, definitely not.
Yeah, and this would be a pretty big risk, but he may even be attainable in the early second round, because teams just don't put high draft picks into, traditional middle linebackers that aren't 3-down, amazing athletes. And I think in terms of if you're looking for that, as you call him, the thumper, the guy you can bring in that's going to be physical and shut the run game down, he is that guy. And so I just think about that. Again, I'm not down on Hargreaves, but I start thinking, would you rather have Apple and an extra third-round pick, or maybe even an extra second-round pick, or would you rather have Hargreaves and no extra second and third-round pick? And that's a tough call with Miami because they're going to need a DN. They're going to need probably another linebacker. They need an offensive tackle, for the future, and they need a safety. And when you get all those holes, and where they're at with the salary cap, they've got to fill those holes through the draft. And I mean, if somebody wants to play ball and jump up there for some reason, unless you've got that elite blue chip pick, and those are the ones I've thrown out there. I mean, obviously, if you can get Jalen Ramsey, you get him. Obviously, if you can get Miles Jack, you get him. Or obviously these guys won't be available, but Laramie Tunsil, you get them. And if those guys are all gone, and I think even you mentioned this, Keith, but I consider Ronnie Staley, even though it's not a direct need, he's a hell of a player. At least you're getting a solid player that for the whole length of his contract is going to be in the starting lineup and contributing to your team. You take a D-backer, that you're just not that sure if he's going to make that jump. That's a lot more risky pick, for the Dolphins, and they just simply can't afford to miss right now with where they're at with their salary cap.
He's my favorite overall prospect. I think we talked about that last week. I'm a huge Ronnie Stanley fan. I think one of the cruelest things about this draft is that I really like some of the guards available. Josh Garnett out of Stanford is a guy who I thought really cemented himself as a really good day 2 guard.
Jonathan Martin.
No, he's like if you watch, I agree too. And here's the thing: I used to love Stanford linemen, guys like David DeCastro, who has had a really good pro career. Jonathan Martin was the last guy I tried to talk myself into, and by that I mean, I remember when he was getting those high draft rejections in 2012, and I got around to watching his tape, and I think I watched him play. It was against Arizona's Brooks Reed, and Brooks Reed just beat the hell out of him. And I was like, did I just watch a bad game, or So I watched another tape, and I forget which game that was, but it was the same thing. Like, the feet were very good, finesse guy, just bull rush to the bejesus and couldn't hold up to it. And I was like, what am I not seeing with this guy that other people are? So when we took him in, I understood why he fell to the second round. And then when we took him, I was like, well, maybe the Dolphins think they can get something out of this guy. So I was able to try to talk myself into it, and it was a mess. Obviously, we all know how the story ends there. We don't really need to get into that. But Josh Garnett's kind of like the anti-Jonathan Martin in that when you watch him play, he is aggressive. He is nasty. His disposition on the field, and a lot of those guys that you've seen play at Stanford, like your Andrews Pete was Cameron Fleming was the right tackle. Guys who were good college players, but you hear the finesse term thrown out there, and I hate that. And I heard some people try to throw that around with Ronnie Stanley. And then if you watch Ronnie Stanley's tape, I don't think he's a finesse guy. I think that he's as nasty as you want to be. Like, there were some games where it got heated. Shaq Lawson got to him early when Clemson played Notre Dame, and then Stanley in that fourth quarter just absolutely put the clamps on him. You could tell he took it personal. So I like that kind of stuff. I like that competitive streak in there. So Stanley's definitely my number one guy, and I would love to draft him, move Brandon Albert to guard, where I've always liked him more as a prospect. I liked Brandon Albert as a guard when he was a guard at Virginia, and then he came out and eventually became a tackle for Kansas City when they drafted him in 2008. But I've always liked him more as a guard. I know he wants to be paid as a left tackle. He is paid as a left tackle. But, at this point, I love the idea. If we could get Ronnie Stanley, who, if I had to give him a pro comparable, Ronnie Stanley reminds me a lot of Richmond Webb, who's obviously the best left tackle to ever play for the Dolphins, by a mile. But just has a lot of the way that, he's a big guy. He's close to 6'6", moves really well. Outstanding pass pro, but he's gotten better and better. Stanley's gotten pretty good as a run blocker too. So, I mean, that's a
Yeah, and it
dream
just
scenario.
those picks, defensive tackles and offensive tackles and quarterbacks get paid in the NFL, and for Miami, they're not going to be able to afford. I don't believe anyway. They're going to be able to afford to replace Brandon Alberts in free agency, in a year or two. They're not going to be able to go out there and put $60 million into another tackle. And
No.
they're just not easy to get. Again, you got to be high up in the draft, and it's about as safe a pick as you could get. Maybe Ronnie Stanley doesn't end up being a dominant Pro Bowl offensive lineman, but chances are he's going to be decent. He's going to be a player that you can plug in and can play. And you just, as you start to get into those second and third rounds, getting elite talent at an offensive tackle, that gets less and less likely. Whereas I can see Miami pulling off getting a D-back or a linebacker in the second or third round that can come in and be solid. But it's a roll of the dice, because you could say, well, with Albert, you don't necessarily need Ronnie Stanley. But I just think it would be insane to expect Brandon Albert to hold up this coming season for all the games, and especially further out than that. I mean, he's getting up there in age. He's come off a bad knee injury, and at some point Miami has got to get that offensive tackle. And if those guys are off the board and you don't have a great option to trade back, I don't know that you can get a better player on the board than Ronnie Stanley at 8. If those other guys are gone, what? Why not do it?
Nope.
So
Okay,
I
I want to.
absolutely agree. One thing I want to point out with Ryan Stanley real quick is I loved his workout. I thought he looked great. He and Tunsil is it sucks that Tunsil is the guy in front of him if you're Stanley, because Greg Robinson went number 2 overall in 2014 to St. Louis, and I think Ronnie Stanley just steals Greg Robinson's lunch money as a prospect. So it just goes to show that every year it's all relative. And a guy like Ronnie Stanley, who probably, had he come out last year, would have been the number 1 tackle taken. And now he's going to be number 2 this year. And if he doesn't go to San Diego, could fall if Baltimore doesn't take him. Although Baltimore definitely needs a tackle. So I'm with you, though. Like, he is my overall number 1 prospect. I mean, and that's not going to change. I love that guy. And I honestly, if you got him in Miami, sign me up.
Yeah, I want to shift gears a little bit here, but first I want to make this real quick announcement. And we have about another half hour to go, but if anybody listening wants to call in, you can call in at 1-954-376-5704. We'll talk about anything you want to talk about. Do you have a draft prospect you'd like us to look at? Do you have something to disagree with? You got a beef with us? We'll discuss it. We don't hide from anybody. But in the meantime, I want to go. Yeah, we'll fight you. So, in the meantime, I want to bring something up. The whole Olivier Vernon thing, and you brought up I don't know who was Chad. It was Chad who brought up the fact that the Cowboys have no pass rushers. What if we entertained the idea that since Dallas is short on pass rushers, let's say that there is a Miami Dolphin who gets to wear a star on the helmet next year, but it's not Lamar Miller? Could you possibly see that happening?
Oh, Olivier Vernon's going to get some big offers. I see a lot of people like saying the transition tag kind of scrutinized a little bit for Miami, but the one thing it does is it doesn't allow anybody to start playing games. Like if somebody wants to come in to Olivier Vernon and offer him, $11 million a year over like 4 or 5 years, and Olivier Vernon, then he's in a situation where he has to decide to reject that offer, assuming he's going to get a bigger offer, or he has to agree to it. And if Olivier Vernon does that, then Miami could just say, yeah, we'll do that. We'll match it. And so there isn't going to be a bidding war for Olivier Vernon. That's what the Dolphins have done by tagging him. And so now it's going to be a team that decides, what offer do we have to make him that he will sign, that he will view as without a doubt better than anybody else is going to offer him, and one the Dolphins won't match. And so that makes it really, really interesting, because it's not like poker where it's like, all right, I'm going to bet just to see if I'm going to get raised. That's not what happens. This is like the gauntlet division of business, where 2 teams get to make an offer, and whoever makes the biggest offer gets them. You don't get to re-raise your offer. And so for that reason, I mean, obviously the Cowboys could use Olivier Vernon, and they're going to look at him. But, my bigger thought is it's going to be a team like the Raiders or something that just have a whole pile of cap space, and they can just make a ridiculous offer to Olivier Vernon. And the reality is they kind of have to, because the Raiders they struggle with their organization and stuff to get players to come there and play. And so if they want to get a guy like Olivier Vernon, it wouldn't stun me at all if the Raiders come and offer him $15-16 million a year. And if that's the case, he's gone. Miami won't be able to match it. But
so we got ourselves a caller, and it's an old friend of ours who he's finally decided that he wants to come back for a little while. So please welcome everybody, Matthew Kanata, to the PhinManiacs podcast.
How's it going, guys?
Not much. We're talking some free agency right now, so it's actually quite excellent that you called in at this very moment. We're about to go into some of what the Dolphins' offseason plans could be.
Is this Lewis?
Yes, it is.
Oh, your voice sounds different on this new thing that you're doing.
Oh, does it? Well, it's working out so far, so I'm liking this live calling thing. So now
Good.
This is the first time you've done it this way, right?
No, I think I've done it before. One time before.
All right. So since you're here, Matt, let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and talk about some free agency. Now, we just finished discussing what might happen with Olivier Vernon, but I'm going to ask you, what are you hearing about what's going to happen with him? Are the Dolphins actually tagging him because they want him, or are they tagging him because they want to sabotage Buffalo and make it hard for them?
It's a tough situation. This Buffalo room, and I just got out of the movies. I just saw Spotlight, so I've been off the grid for the past 3 hours. Has Buffalo been rumored? Have they been rumored?
No. I'm making the Charles Clay comparison.
Charles Clay. There's not a lot of leaks coming out about Olivier Vernon. We talked to his agent. Me and someone else texted his agent the other day, David Cantor, and he said that he's not commenting until after free agency. He said there's way too many moving parts right now. This was obviously before the tag was applied on Vernon. What we do know is that the Dolphins don't feel that Vernon is worth $15 million, $15.7 million. At the end of the day, it's $3 more million that you're paying for Olivier Vernon between the transition tag and the franchise tag. So the Dolphins are saying that they view him more as someone between the $12 million range, which they offered him, and the $14-15 million range. They're letting Vernon set the market for himself because obviously they couldn't come to a deal. Mike Garafolo earlier today said that the Dolphins could possibly still trade Vernon not before free agency begins, but get a deal in place with another team. I wasn't aware that you could trade someone on a transition tag, but I guess that's the case. So, I think it's still up in the air right now. I know the Dolphins have been rumored for the past several weeks, as I have and others have said that they are really looking hard at the defensive line in the upcoming draft. They are looking very hard at Bruce Irvin, which his role still isn't clearly defined. Many have thought that they would move him to defensive end right away if they get him in free agency. Some are now saying that he could be a hybrid role and play both linebacker and defensive end when warranted. So a lot of things hinge on what's going to happen with Olivier Vernon. At the end of the day, I talked to someone within the Dolphins organization today. He said it's 50-50. Obviously, that sounds like an obvious answer, right? But in reality, it just shows how unsure they still are. The transition tag doesn't allow them to fully commit thus far in the process. Doing the franchise tag would back them into a big corner, and they either have to be forced to trade him or keep the salary or pay him a long-term deal. So, it's all up in the air right now. We're going to find out a lot over the next 8 days before the new league year. I'm sure we'll get some leaks coming out once the legal tampering period begins, although they're still talking right now, obviously. But, agents are going to keep it quiet over the next several days and over the next week until that weekend before March 9th hit.
So how about the cornerback position, Matt? We have a lot of rumors going out about what the Dolphins want to do there. The Janoris Jenkins rumor coming out. He just got released by St. Louis. I know that Trumaine Johnson got tagged, and the whole Dolphins world collectively shouted out a big no in response. But are you hearing anything regarding what the Dolphins might do at corner?
Yeah, so I tweeted out earlier today that the Dolphins' biggest fears were realized when the Rams franchised Trumaine Johnson. He was going to probably be a Miami Dolphin if he hit the free agent market. He was the Dolphins' #1 target heading into free agency. That's no longer an option unless they give him 2 first-round picks and then negotiate a long-term deal with him.
people are saying Janoris Jenkins. Listen, Janoris has problems of off-field trouble. Miami's probably not the best place for him, and he's going to be paid, wants to be paid the most money out of all the cornerbacks on the market. So I think he's going to be off limits for the Dolphins just because of the price tag and the off-field issues. And that's the thing with the Dolphins right now. They're a little afraid the cornerback prices are going to go through the roof, and it's quite possible that it will. You have Sean Smith. I know a lot of people are talking about him. But listen, I was thinking this today. Sean Smith was let go by the Dolphins. He was a free agent. They let him go to the Chiefs. And now the Chiefs are letting Sean Smith walk away in free agency. So this will be two teams that are letting him walk away. He's a great quarterback, but it has to, raise an alarm if two teams are letting him walk after everything that he's done. Plus, Sean Smith plays a lot of press coverage. Vance Joseph is not a press coverage guy. He's his own guy. Obviously, he'll mix it up when the time warrants it, but he's a majority zone guy that's going to coach that way. So then you look at someone like Morris Claiborne, who's going to be a free agent. And then you look at somebody like Pat McJones, who's been very heavily rumored to the Dolphins because of the failure with Vance Joseph. So that could be a possibility as well. The Dolphins, in an ideal world, want to move on from Brett Grimes. They don't want the distraction here. They like Brent. They like his competitiveness. They like his fire. They like his passion for the game of football. But obviously, Nico's a huge distraction that the Dolphins would rather not deal with anymore.
Well, I can't imagine anybody would want to.
Yeah, right. And then you got the Hayward cornerback from Green Bay. Great zone player, but very iffy tackling. He cannot be the number one cornerback on the roster. That would spell big trouble for the Dolphins. One other thing that I want to mention is the cornerbacks are pretty deep against draft. The Dolphins could get someone like Mackenzie Alexander with the number one pick. I know a lot of people are talking about Vernon Hargraves, and I think majority say that he is one of the top guys in the draft. Some other guys I've talked to that have really studied him for a long time, dating back to his freshman year in college, say that he's more of a guy you can get in the early part of the bottom of the first round. Then you also got someone like Eli Apple you can probably snag up in the second round. And then you got the defensive line as well. So, again, it's all fluid. This guy I was talking to the other day knows a lot of what's going on with the Dolphins. He actually said point blank, if things don't go the Dolphins' way in free agency, this defense this year could actually be worse than last year's defense.
Oh, God, that's a scary thing to think about.
It was a pretty scary thing to read. But, the Dolphins want to get the offensive line shored up before free agency begins. That includes looking at Jeff Schwartz and possibly signing him before free agency begins. They also want to get Lamar Miller locked up before free agency begins. So when free agency does in fact begin, they can throw all their chips on the table and make a huge run at defense. They want to bring in two cornerbacks. They want to try to bring in two linebackers, one for sure. And then depending on what happens with Vernon, defensive lineman perhaps. And they're also going to be pretty active in the defensive tackle market.
Okay, so now I want to ask everybody this, and this is probably more for fun than anything else, but I'm going to ask Matt to give some thoughts on it first, and then I want everybody else to talk about it. How would a Reggie Bush reunion sound to you guys?
Sorry, I just threw up. Sorry, Lewis, I just threw up after the question.
Yeah, somebody told our favorite beat writer that, what would happen if Reggie Bush came back? And he was like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. The leadership would be great. I'm like, really?
Yeah, because how well did that work out in San Francisco with the leadership there, right?
Yeah, not to mention his play overall.
Not to jump the different player, but if the Dolphins can't get Lamar Miller locked up, I think they got to take a real look at Matt Forte. Obviously with Gase, there is a relationship there, but he seems like a much better back to pair with Ajayi than somebody like Reggie Bush to me.
Not to mention,
you might want to look at Forte too. If you don't get Lamar Miller, just to keep him away from the Patriots, because the Patriots are going to be very interested in him.
Yeah, he fits their system perfectly. So
New England has that tendency to just snag the guy who let's see, Tom Brady needs a running back to throw to. Here, you can be the new Shane Vereen, and there you go, it's done.
If Matt Forte goes to the Patriots, he'll be the number one PPR running back in fantasy football next year. That dude will catch about 7 passes a game for Brady.
Well, I'll make sure to make a note of that in my fantasy football team next year.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, what was the other thing I wanted to say? I forgot what it was now. I know this is probably not even on anybody's radar, but if people are talking about Reggie Bush, I don't see why the Dolphins wouldn't at least take a look and see what Noshawn Moreno's up to.
Oh, God, get the hell off your Noshawn Moreno
Come
train.
on!
He's been on that for the past years.
He's been
that
on
dude
that
is
train
not
for 2 years.
reliable. He's been out of football for a year. Look what Jerry Jones just said about Greg Hardy. You know, tremendous player, scumbag of a person, tremendous player, though. But even him being out of football for a year, Jerry Jones said it really showed the rust as the season wore on. So, no.
Come on. Like, people are talking about Reggie Bush. Why not Noshawn?
Listen, the Dolphins have so many holes. I was going to say maybe even consider drafting Ezekiel Elliott in the first round, trading down a few picks. But, man, the Dolphins are so beat up on their defense. They got so much stuff to cover. That's why Lamar Miller is going to be a huge piece of free agency. They need to re-sign him before free agency begins. Otherwise, he's probably not coming back.
2 other names that aren't in the news right now. Just curious if you've heard anything about them, Matt. If you can say it, would be have you heard anything about the tight end position? Are they looking at bringing back Jordan Cameron? Is that something that's in the works? Because
I don't know. You know, he has a high cap number.
Yeah, I don't think they can keep him at his current cap number. They'd have to negotiate him.
I mean, Gase sounded like someone who really was going to keep him at his cap number. And it's like, I don't know if you're trying to get trade value for the guy because he has none. I don't know if you're going to try to upgrade the tight end position. You don't want to piss him off if you can't find an upgrade. They do have interest in Zach Miller, but he's been injury riddled over the past several seasons. He's been struggled to stay on the field. We saw that there was no chemistry between Tannehill and Cameron. You know, that's a really weird situation. Gase, I don't know. Deion Sims is unreliable when he has the football in his hands.
Defense the way it is, it'd be nice. I understand they had the issues, but he's still a solid player, and my thought was just get him.
Right. Oh, yeah. Cameron can get the job done if they get him involved. Make no doubt about it, but he is getting paid a lot of money.
Other question, and I don't know that the Dolphins even know, but, I mean, obviously with Olivier Vernon right now with transition tagged, and who knows what's going to happen with Cameron Wake still with his salary and injury number.
Yeah.
Anything at all out there on the street on Deion Jordan? Is he a lost cause at this point? Is there a possibility he plays for the team this year, you think, or what do you think?
I would be shocked if the Dolphins kept him on the team. If you read the Monday Morning Quarterback article that Jenny Bregas, I think is her last name, put out today, I tweeted it out, and I highlighted the section. The Dolphins spent, I think it was 9 or 12 days talking about the kind of footballs that they wanted, and the underlying theme that they're going to follow is players who are competitive and love football. Deion Jordan does not fit either of those. Plus, his off-field troubles. It's a new regime. I don't think they really want to be involved with that. It's unfortunate. Dude has a lot of talent. But listen, if you're posting up pictures on Instagram during the season out of shape, that obviously shows you don't love football. Just getting suspended as much as you did because you didn't learn your lesson. The dude doesn't love football. I expect the Dolphins to move on from him as soon as he's reinstated and back on the team. Remember, they were ready to trade with the Eagles, and they had a deal lined up. I know this was refuted a little bit, but it was really true. Obviously, the Dolphins tried to bury it through their beat reporters because, Deion Jordan's on the team again. But right before the suspension came down, the Dolphins had a deal in place with Philadelphia to trade him away. It was going to be a late-round pick, but they were trying to get rid of him last year, so I'd be shocked if he was back on the team.
Maybe we can trade him to San Francisco. I hear they're looking for defense.
Yeah, maybe Chip Kelly would take him back. Hey, he needs to get like a 6th and 7th round pick. Isn't that crazy?
He needs some ducks.
People will talk about Jeff Ireland trading up and how bad of a decision that was. Listen, Jeff Ireland did not give up a lot. You swapped first-round picks, and I think Jeff Ireland gave up a third-round pick. So really, people will talk about that, but really he didn't give up a ton. At the top of that draft, everyone thought they were trading up for, Lane Johnson, and didn't he just get a contract extension or something? Like, he hasn't been lighting the world on fire.
Yeah, he hasn't been anything special.
The top of that draft was not very good at all.
No, it was terrible.
Well, we thought that Deion Jordan, like, let's be honest about this. There weren't a whole lot of people who were looking at Deion Jordan and saying bust. There were a lot of people saying, well, this guy could be the next Jason Taylor if utilized properly, but they weren't. And I'm not going to say that it was the Dolphins or a team like that who drove Deion Jordan to be who he was, but the drug issues aside, Deion Jordan had all the ability in the world. He just didn't. He just decided not to do anything with it.
Oh, make no mistake about it, the coaching staff used him the wrong way.
They just should have stayed put and drafted Tyler Eifert like I wanted them to, and none of this would have been a problem.
I was amazing.
Hey, one more name for you, Matt, while you're still on the phone. Have you heard anything about the backup quarterback? Do you see the Dolphins maybe drafting a guy, or do you think Matt Moore returns? Or
I think Matt Moore returns if they can't find anybody else, but I do want to draft and develop someone who can come in and have a fresh voice in Tannehill's ear, see the field a different way. Ryan Tannehill, get someone who can really trust and fit in the system. Matt Moore's a gunslinger. He doesn't really fit in that system that Gates has. You need to be disciplined and have a lot of control with what you're doing. I don't know who they're looking at specifically for that, but I really didn't want to bring someone into, Tannehill doesn't work out.
How about shocking the world and with Gates bringing in Peyton Manning to back up Ryan Tannehill?
But Jesus.
I don't think that'll happen.
If that happened, then they wouldn't be calling for him to be a backup. All the Tana haters would come out and say, Peyton Manning for Pro Bowl starting quarterback. It's like, you guys, I wonder, like, and people would actually say that. I hope people realize that Peyton's arm is dead, and this whole length, the whole lengthy stretching out of his retirement announcement. I think there have been like three separate days on news reports where they've reported that Peyton Manning has said he's going to retire, and he keeps coming back and saying, I never said that. So it's like, make up your mind, okay? It's like, if three people have reported it already, then somebody is saying it.
I think he still wants to play, but he's going to want to start a job, obviously.
I don't know what Peyton wants. I would hope that Peyton realizes that he is currently the top guy in the world. He went out, he won a Super Bowl. He should have just gone the Ray Lewis route and said, "This is it, I'm done." But I don't know. If Peyton really loves football that much, then he should be willing to take a backup role, don't you think?
I don't know if Peyton Manning knows how to be a backup, and honestly, he shouldn't at this stage in his career. You just won the Super Bowl. Get out. Retire on top,
That's my thinking, but apparently Peyton doesn't feel that way. But if he's
I'll tell you my thinking. If you get to say bring Noshan Marino back, I still think Tim Tebow could be the backup quarterback.
Okay, but oh my God. Oh. Okay, Noshan did good when he played, and he's been out of. Okay, if he really retired, then fine, whatever. But it's not like he's not worth the look. What are we gonna have to pay him? Vet minimum? Big deal.
Yeah, I'm just pushing your buttons.
Yeah, I know. You're messing with me. I know you guys love me, but it's like, sometimes. And besides, I wouldn't mind Tim Tebow on the Miami Dolphins. That's just me. But, okay, I just lost like 6 followers. Anyway, I think that's going to be it for today. We're about at 9:30. We're about an hour and a half on this show. So,
yeah, it was nice calling and nice talking to you guys tonight.
All right, so that's going to be it for this show. For myself, my co-host Chad Ronenbaum, Keith Beebe of the Phinsider with the PH, and of course Matthew Kanata at Fins Insider. Oh, and Brandon Howard, you have to do Sports Talk Brandon. So essentially, it's Sports Talk Brandon without the vowels in the first 2 words. So go follow him, and of course you can follow Matt for all the latest insider news with the Miami Dolphins. And that's going to be it for this show. So I'll see you all next time for another edition of PhinManiacs Live.